Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming downstairs if you were already at the reception earlier this evening. And thank you for coming. This is every reason of a night to stay home. So I think it just goes to show you we spent too many nights at home over the past 2 years that we're just as eager to come to an event like this when it's minus 20 on a Monday. So thank you. And we have guests in town from as far as London, Kansas City, California, all and everything in between. So I thank you on behalf of CMLC for taking the time this evening and joining us at this special event. It's really heartwarming to see so many people here tonight who are part of the community, who are members of our project team, and many of the folks that we work with on the various projects that CMLC is involved with. And it's the first of our Placemakers events to take place in person. We did 3 of these events virtually over the course of the last 2 years, so it's wonderful to now be back with warm bodies in a beautiful space like this and enjoying this conversation this evening. Before we start, I'd like to first acknowledge that our work in the Rivers District is located at the confluence of the Bow and Elbow Rivers in a place called Mohkinstsis, a Blackfoot word that means elbow. It is in the spirit of truth, respect, and reciprocity that we honor and acknowledge Mohkinstsis and recognize the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai nations, the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley nations, and the Tsuut'ina Nation. Southern Alberta is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So we have a great program tonight. We have a full program. We have lots of wonderful speakers who are part of this celebration with us. But I'd like to first start by introducing Andrew Mosker, the president and CEO of Studio Bell. We're thrilled to be hosting this event in this beautiful building. It's been a while since we've been able to be in here as a group. Andrew and his team steward this building, and Andrew has been a long-standing visionary for East Village and a champion of this community for many, many years. This particular facility is an integral part to the community from very early days when we first started thinking about the master plan for East Village, which you'll hear about tonight, and then coming into a building like this tonight is a full circle moment. So thank you, Andrew, for extending this venue to us, hosting, and I'll welcome you up to the stage.
Thank you, Claire. Good evening. Bonsoir, good evening, Oki. On behalf of the NMC Volunteer Board of Directors and staff, volunteers at large, and our many supporters here in Mohkinstsis, Calgary, and across Canada, it's a real honor and privilege to offer some brief remarks to welcome each of you tonight to the National Music Center space at Studio Bell, right here in the heart of East Village for this Placemakers event. It doesn't seem that long ago when we were excited to share a vision for a new music organization based here in Calgary. One that was designed to help amplify a much larger civic placemaking vision that would work in collaboration to bring a new energy and vibrancy back into this neighborhood and sacred gathering place known historically by the Indigenous people of these lands as Mohkinstsis, as Claire alluded to. In 2007, 2008, yes, almost 15 years ago, the organization that preceded National Music Center, Cantos Music Foundation, if any of you who have been in Calgary a long time will remember that name, operated out of the historic Customs House on 11th Avenue and 1st Street, not far from here. But we realized we needed a new space and a new purpose and a new identity. And based on years of experimentation and programs, collections and collaboration, consultation and research, a new purpose for Cantos emerged. One that would harness the power of music to create positive and inclusive change and be a catalyst for many other things as well. Economic diversification and job creation, brand extension for Calgary and the region, and help lead several new exciting developments within the Canadian creative industries and the arts, specifically music, from a municipal, regional, and national perspective. Since the plan for this neighborhood was already so bold, we wanted to amplify that vision with a bold vision for music as well. Hence, Cantos Music Foundation changed its name, reinvented itself, and the new National Music Center for Canada was born and given a home right here. And as the saying goes, the rest is history. At that time, we explored numerous physical locations to build a new NMC, evaluating where this new vision to be a catalyst through music could be realized within a location of a physical space and determine that that space needed to be right here. embracing the history of the neighborhood from Indigenous to settler traditions, then inviting many voices to participate, this new journey for Calgary and Canada began. Eventually, with the support of so many people in this room, actually, and many, many others, combined with a decade of planning, design, heritage readaptation, I learned a few architectural terms along the way, like that, construction, and of course, fundraising, NMC opened and was launched in 2016. Throughout that time, it was a project that many doubted if it would ever happen. In some cases, some thought it shouldn't happen here, in Calgary. The question of why Calgary was a frequent one. We had a very different opinion, of course. Calgary, Mohkinstsis, and the vision set out for this neighborhood by the CMLC was exactly the right place for the NMC to be built. So, with the help of the Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, and as I said, many of you that are in this room right here, the three levels of government, corporate sponsors, and philanthropy, we persevered, and here we are, a new home for music in Canada. 6 years later, the NMC is now home to 4 Canadian Music Halls of Fame, multilingual, a national Indigenous programming advisory committee made up of Indigenous music experts from across Canada, a one-of-a-kind residency recording studios for music makers and creators, unique performance space for gatherings, exhibition galleries for musical stories about Canada to be shared for enjoyment and, of course, learning, and so much more. Over 600,000 people since 2016 from all walks of life have come through these doors to experience NMC's programs, concerts, special events, exhibitions, and collections in this neighborhood, including 50,000 elementary school children, over 2,500 artists from across Canada, and even ICU patients in local hospitals have benefited from NMC's reach through music therapy. Many major regional and national music events are increasingly excited to come to Calgary and experience what we have to offer here at the National Music Center. And NMC as an organization is emerging as an influence on music in Canada and Calgary, and increasingly the region is emerging as a leading music city-friendly jurisdiction in Western Canada. Many of the artists that are part of Canada's greatest musical exports have also visited to share their stories. For example, Buffy Sainte-Marie, Geddy Lee from Rush, Andy Kim, Terry Clark, and so many other Canadian music icons, with many more to come in the future. At its height, prior to scaling back during the pandemic, National Music Center had created over 40 full-time jobs, 50 part-time, and engaged over 300 volunteers. And at our height, our operating revenues were just over $11 million per year. A significant difference from our operations dating back to 2006, when our revenues were a third of the size. While the pandemic may have forced us to scale back our momentum and operations, like it did for so many in the sector across Canada and the world, we do see a pathway to rescaling NMC in the future, and we are working at it every day, so stay tuned for more details. On behalf of all of us at National Music Center, a big thank you to the CMLC for their continued support to build and reinvent this East Village here in Mohkinstsis and the adjacent neighborhoods of Victoria Park and in the downtown core. Thank you for believing in the NMC as far back as 2007 and 2008, when we handed you a proposal with a conductor's baton and a blues harmonica on it and said we could reinvent or help you reinvent East Village through music. The history of this place as a gathering for people for thousands of years, for the betterment of our collective future is what is at hand now. And I'm just so delighted that we're part of this ongoing story with all of you so that we can help reshape Calgary for many generations to come. Thank you for having me give some introductory comments tonight. Thank you for all your support and wishing you a wonderful and inspiring Placemakers evening. Thank you.
All right, so before we welcome our first speaker up, in thinking about the 15 years of CMLC and also perhaps most importantly, thinking forward to the next 15, we've got a brief video to show you which just captures some of the early inspiration of East Village to where we are today and some of the work that's taking shape just south of us in the Culture and Entertainment District. Thank you.
In 2007, 15 years ago, The Calgary Municipal Land Corporation received a mandate that would forever change the landscape of downtown Calgary. The task was at once simple and enormous, as clear as it was complex: to implement a public infrastructure program called the Rivers District Community Revitalization Plan. The plan was designed to kickstart Calgary's urban renewal. It did that and so much more. We started in East Village, and there was much to do in that neglected neighborhood, including raising the floodplain some 4 feet. In the beginning, you could see the change coming, but you couldn't always feel it. Then, on a cold November day in 2010, 1 kilometer of Riverwalk opened on the Bow. Overnight, Calgarians were walking, running, and strolling with kids on Riverwalk, as though it had always been part of city life.
That's when we knew that CMLC was doing something right in East Village. We began to understand that Calgarians wanted this place, that they needed it.
Riverwalk set the tone, but it was just the beginning. There were developers to persuade, retailers and restaurateurs to attract, public art and public space to plan, events to imagine. CMLC found a receptive audience of residential developers from across Canada. They understood the vision. They built the reality. Now, more than 10 years into the master plan delivery, East Village is a riverfront destination, a downtown home, and a thriving innovation hub. Where the bow and elbow meet, urban life has been reimagined. $400 million in public investment has attracted $3 billion in private investment, brought us some of the best architects in the world, and given Calgary places and spaces that are loved by locals and known far beyond the city limits. Oh, and did we mention the East Village Dog Park? East Village brought events and stores, restaurants and hotels, and homes, more than 1,500 condominiums. 300 residential units are currently under construction, with more set to break ground next year. New developer partners have other projects in the planning stages or in the pipeline for future development. Ottawa-based Minto Communities is the newest developer partner in East Village.
The East Village Master Plan and Vision have proven their long-term staying power, and the Riverside location is invaluable. We're proud to be a part of the future of East Village.
The next development project to break ground in East Village is EV 606, the brainchild of Winnipeg-based Alston Properties. 44 residential units, 6 stories, 9,300 square feet of street-level retail, and the next chapter in the East Village story. But beyond infrastructure, placemaking, and homes, the vision for East Village brought people. Some 4,000 of them, of all ages, ambitions, and persuasions. A new generation of downtowners. Urbanites who, like us, believe in East Village and the Rivers District. They believe in downtown and in Calgary. As East Village has grown, so has CMLC. From a small, passionate, and driven team to a large, passionate, and equally driven team. 35 people leading more than $1 billion of work. Today, CMLC is reimagining the southern half of the Rivers District as Calgary's culture and entertainment district. We're growing the city's downtown story. The confluence of 2 rivers that gave birth to the gathering place, the settlement, and the city is the neighborhood where Calgary's future continues to unfold.
CMLC's commitment and investment in Calgary's East End has created a new identity for urban downtown living in Calgary. The next wave of places and people will continue to build on the promise and possibility of East Village and the Rivers District as a whole.
$600 million in new city building projects are underway in the Culture and Entertainment District. And there's more to come. Since 2007, CMLC has grown with the Rivers District mandate that started it all. It's been 15 years, and with new partners and new projects, our next 15 years will bring even more vitality to the city. We're just getting started. CMLC, creative city making since 2007.
I think I'm going to do every speech right after a video so I don't have to say anything really. That was fantastic. Good job, team. I am Kate Thompson, President and CEO of Calgary Municipal Land Corporation, and thank you all for sharing your time with us on this snowy evening, like Claire said, to gain a little bit of insight into what have we been up to and where are we going. So the Placemaker series started in 2015, and we started it in order to provide a little bit of insight into what guides our projects, what kind of goes behind the scenes to make it all happen, and to take a master plan vision from paper to reality. And in doing so, in 2015, we thought, let's bring people in and see if they're interested in taking a little peek behind the curtain and talking to our partners and talking to our collaborators and talk a little bit about the insight. So since 2015, we've had 12 of these events, and as Claire said, this is our first in-person event in a long time, in 2 years. And those not in-person events were really interesting. They might have looked very seamless from the outside, but the Zoom ones were not so easy to pull off necessarily. But we've had 12 of them and talking about different chapters in the life of CMLC. So we talked about retail development, we've talked about community building, landscape architecture, we had one on the new Central Library, we talked about different community building, about art, public art. So we've hosted quite a few of them, and it gives you kind of, as the video did, a little bit of an example of the breadth of our work. So 15 years ago, just very briefly about CMLC before we get into our panelists and our speakers, there was an idea that sparked a vision about how you could bring a specialized team together to look at the redevelopment of a unique area of our city, of Calgary, that had long been overlooked. And so this 504-acre village was filled with opportunity and history. And that's the good privilege that all the team at CMLC has to work on all the projects within that 504-acre area. Fast forward from today, and you can see from the opening video that the team has been very busy. And it includes many people that I can't see because these lights are very powerful, but it's also kind of nice not to be able to see everyone in some ways. And all of this community that we have here today and outside of these walls too, pulled together to bring a lot of the projects that you see up on the screen. And it ranged, as you saw, everything from major community building initiatives, the $400 million investment that included a 31-acre island in St. Patrick's Island. It was the new Central Library, it's the last brick, it's underpasses. All of that work collaborated together to create what we have today. And also the current projects we are working on currently. So we just had, which was a much nicer day for the beam signing for the BMO Center expansion, which was an excellent time to get the whole team together and talk about what we're working on and seeing it truly take shape. And the work that we're doing, bringing together teams for Arts Commons and pulling together the team and the concept for that project. And anywhere down to, as well, what should public toilets look like? So we have the breadth of work, working from, the soon-to-be 1 million square feet at the BMO Center expansion to the smaller scale. So I think that's kind of the unique aspect of CMLC, is that we get to look at the macro and the micro and everything in between. It's not always easy work, but it definitely is always rewarding once you get to that finish line. So I've been with CMLC for 10 of the 15 years, which is hard to imagine, and as CEO and president for the last 3 years. And those have been challenging times. Obviously, we've had a global pandemic, a little bit of market supply issue, and some escalation to deal with along the way. But we've also grown our team. So our team has grown by 30%, I know many of which are here today. And we're now 35 people strong and working on a diverse set of different projects. The value of our projects has also grown and changed enormously in the last 3 years. So we went from the largest project that we oversaw was $245 million, the new Central Library, to now a combined total of $1.2 billion worth of work that our team is overseeing. And the breadth of the work ranges, as we've seen, everything from the buildings that I discussed, but we're also working with some of you in this room on LRT platform renovations, road extension, taking 17th Avenue across McLeod Trail. Seems really, really simple when you say it on paper, and then a little bit more difficult to take it on in reality. And then to also building out what can the experience of a theater be in our great city, and what does that look like right along Stephen Avenue. So in the wide range of work that we do, we obviously do it on the benefit of the city and city council, our shareholder, and also the city at large, citizens at large. And we're starting to see it coming together in terms of it's becoming a destination. I hear from so many people that that's where I take my family when they come to visit. When I want to show off Calgary, I take them to somewhere and they list one of the great spots that you saw in the video. And that for all of us, myself and our team, we definitely think of that as we're working. So now we're looking at, we turned south in 2018 and we started to say, well, of this 504-acre area, we have the East Victoria Park, and what could we do with that? So in 2018, we looked at that and are now working on the Culture and Entertainment District. And as I said, they've got the BMO Centre expansion, $500 million project that's truly, truly taking shape, the last piece of steel this week. And actually, I was sitting here thinking when Andrew was speaking about this facility, and some of you were here with me as well when they put the last piece of steel up on this project. So it's interesting to just see the history of all these projects coming together and the community that's supporting them along the way. We talked a little bit about what's under construction in the area. So we have over 330 units, residential units under construction, 2 more announcements this year, breaking ground next year, and more development partners that we'll be talking about in the coming weeks with all of you. Calgary's growing, and we are so happy and pleased and grateful to be a part of it all, and happy to be sharing some of the stories and giving you a little peek behind the curtain about how it all comes together. And this is a really great opportunity in the 15th in our 12th Placemakers to talk about the past 15 years and kind of reflect on what CMLC has done. And I think we've pulled together a great panel to talk about all the different aspects of that work. And so on to the real show. I would love to introduce the lineup of speakers that are going to speak today and get out of the way so they can share some of their wisdom and some of their experiences. So first off, we're going to hear from Mayor Gondek. And Mayor Gondek, we're thrilled to have you here because not only are you the mayor of our city, but you've also been a CMLC board member for many years and guiding us in the vision, and it's inspiring to see your vision for Calgary and your support of CMLC. And then we have Phil Bonds, who's going to talk to us, who's flown here from London and was really interested in having breakfast because I think he'd been up for about 8 hours by that time this morning. So thank you, Phil, for making the journey over. And was one of the early thinkers of CMLC in the East Village District and really made a vision that so many of you now have come to see as the East Village Master Plan. And it was from Phil's thinking and inspiration in that competition. And then we have Tomalin Reeves, who's going to talk to us a little bit about how he's guided our team both strategically and also on the real estate development side of things to make sure that we've gone through many different ups and downs in our city since 2007. And Jeremy's been along for almost that whole ride and guiding us and helping us deliver with his wealth of knowledge. And then last but not least, Sasa Radulovic, who's not only a former classmate of mine, but also has started to shape some of the vision, architectural vision in East Village to talk a little bit about what it was like to work in East Village and what he's done and the impact that his architectural design has had in elevating the conversation in East Village. So with my great pleasure, I would like to introduce Mayor Gondek.
Good evening, everyone. Oki, Dara Nastara, Tansei, and Ambawastij, thanks for joining us tonight on Treaty 7 territory. And what a privilege to be with all of you tonight. I am a giant nerd when it comes to city building, so I have been in and around this idea of the Rivers District and how it came to be for years. And it was back in my days at the Westman Center at the University of Calgary where I really began to spark that same interest amongst a group of students who was the first of their kind to learn about what city building meant, how the planning profession, how commercial real estate, and this idea of governance could all really come together. I remember teaching at 8th and 8th, the U of C downtown campus, and bringing a program called Urban Plan from Urban Land Institute to Calgary. It was the first time that that program had been brought to Canada. And so we used Lego blocks to redevelop this make-believe community. And the students were told that there is a project within this redevelopment site that is a homeless shelter. There is also a project within this redevelopment site that talks about transit-oriented development. And you give them all of these parameters that they have to consider to create a brand new community. And you take them through 5 weeks of this. And the best, most rewarding part of it was when they finished their projects and they did their presentations. I got them on the train on 7th, brought them down here to City Hall Station, and walked them over to East Village. And they all went, oh, it's real, it's actually a thing. And it was amazing to be able to show them how something that's theoretical in nature can actually play out. And it is a pleasure to serve as the mayor of a city that believed in itself so many years ago. I want to thank former Mayor Dave Bronconnier and Councillor Drew Farrell, who believed so much in the idea of bringing back East Village to what it should be, who fought to have tax increment financing, which we politely now call a community revitalization levy. Those fights back in the day and that belief in this part of the city has led us to this facility and all of the others that you see in this area now. And it is this type of belief and this type of persistence that has brought us forward as a city council to invest another $250 million in our downtown revitalization. It was this place and the promise of what could be that has pushed us to be everything we can still be. So I want to thank everyone who was a part of this in the early days, 15 years ago, when I was just a big giant nerd and loving everything about city building, to the point we're at today where we are showing the world that we're a city that needs to be recognized for being forward-thinking and future-proof. So thank you to all of you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our next speakers.
So I'm just going to formally introduce you, apparently, but you can still come up. No, come on up. I'm not going to read the whole thing because you have an extensive bio. But so Phil has 30 years experience as a London-based urban planner and designer and has worked for Broadway Malyan since 2002, focusing on international projects. And actually, I just learned that you actually only did 2 weeks of the allotted 6 weeks for your competition to get this job, so you really are very focused. I think that's really admirable. And so you, Phil, started working with CMLC in 2007, like I said, as the winning master plan competition. So I'm going to invite Phil Bonds up to speak and tell us a little bit about his view from the beginning to now. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you very much, Kate. So, yes, East Village now, here we are. This is the gadget that makes things go. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the transit city model. Yeah, basically, East Village is essentially a last mile development that relates very much to the LRT, and there's huge scope to develop that further in Calgary and to make this a very successful model that you can replicate further and across and around the city. Broadway Malyan, the company I work for, designs cities, places, buildings with a sense of aspiration, and we really focus on trying to deliver something special, different, and identifiable that's going to stand in the minds of those who want to invest here. The firm I work for is 350 employees, and we've been in business since 1958. We've got 14 international offices, and we've been dealing with projects at scale, and everything from the doorknob and the window casement through to an area of 350 350,000 hectares. So we deal with all kinds of projects and scales and densities. And East Village, I would say, is one of our proudest moments. It's the one where everything's come together. It's where we've worked in partnership with a range of different businesses, clients, to create something really, really special. And, you see testament to that, what you see on the ground today. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how myself as an urbanist, we've developed this idea with CMLC through the competition process, and then through, again, the ARP, the Area Redevelopment Plan, how we then put that from vision into reality. And it wasn't a slow process, but it was. It's been intensive, and it's relied on the strength of partnership that we've had and the sense of telepathy between our own teams and those who wanted to achieve the same vision and goals as we've expressed in our plans. I've put this slide here as a sort of early snippet to show basically that East Village has always been a place of great upheaval, change, dynamism, and not necessarily for the reasons you might think. I'd never heard of the Great Fire of Calgary in 1886, but this came, funnily enough, 5 years before the railways were built, and you wonder if that Great Fire was part of the plan to clear the land to put the railways down. And then later on, as that area developed, the horse and carts had gone, the railways had come in. You can see how industrialized East Village had become. And you can actually see just over the letter T of industrial, that's where the Fort Calgary actually is. It's barely visible in amongst all the detritus and factories and so on. It doesn't even look like it's something from 1970, but judging by the tower blocks, that's the date from which that hails. But when we came in, the Bow Tower hadn't even been built. As he said, Mayor Bronconnier and the Three Rivers District Group had just been set up. And they'd been set up around this fantastic model, which they called the Community Revitalization Levy. It's an adaptation of American TIF model. And it's sought to try to get the development investment value to reinvest that in areas of real need. And I think it's a great model, and we've said it to our clients worldwide, and everybody always listens to us wide-eyed. They want to copy this model, they appreciate the way it works, and they know the value it can bring to their developments. And we're talking about areas all over the world, from Africa to China to India, to the Middle East. So it's a great model. You should be really proud of it, and it's really seen delivery happen. I think without that model, you wouldn't see half of what you see here in East Village today. But when we arrived here, I know the place here in this photo looks terrible, but actually what we concentrated in wasn't the plots, because all those plots were going to change. They're all going to get developed. Doesn't matter what's on there, what was there now at that time when we were there. It's more important about the context within which they fit. So what we saw was this majestic river, the fantastic Fort Calgary, the amazing downtown core, the closeness to places like Inglewood, and just the proximity to the airport, and it had everything going for it. True, the condition of the place as it stood then wasn't great, but it had so much potential. So we like to think of the context first. The context drove the solution. That's what drives the value. That's what drives the ambition. That's what drives the keenness to invest and brings everyone with it. The other thing is that developments aren't built overnight. They take a long time to come together. So what do you do in the meantime? How do you market this land that's so empty, so utilitarian and so uninspiring? Well, you put events on. You put a rich program of activities, festivals, gigs, public art, branding. You bring all of this stuff together, and you do it in a frenzied way that brings attention, that gets people down there, that gets East Village noticed. And I think that's what CMLC did as well. They had a fantastic program. They took some of the ideas that we had, and we all together, we all promoted East Village in the same way. What I should have said was, back on the previous slide, was when we first came to East Village, the taxi driver, this was after dark, the taxi driver wouldn't even drop us there, because they said, "You Brits, you'll just get turned over, you'll get robbed, there'll be some awful incident that he wouldn't be able to live with." So he said, "Don't go there tonight, go there tomorrow." So we took his advice. I somehow wish that we hadn't. I think it would be more adventurous if we'd walked around at night with a torch, but we didn't. Anyway, so we went there in the day, we interviewed the CMLC team, really tried to understand what the basis of what they wanted was, and then we went back to the hotel and I drew this sketch. And this sketch is uncannily similar to what the final event was, and that's back in November 2007, when we just had a bit of tracing paper over an aerial photo. But what this image is trying to tell you is that it's about perimeter blocks. Was the idea. You don't want to have streets that are not framed. The framing of the streets is really important, so that you get the eyes on the street, so that you make sure that those areas maintain their vitality, and that you have another pair of eyes looking at what's going on there. So you have the sense of public surveillance, activation through the retail and so on. And it's also a very good way, bearing in mind that this was drawn at a time when the UK was already in recession and Calgary was about to have the same recession. So perimeter blocks are far more feasible. You can do a little bit by little bit. You don't have to dig a big hole in the ground and build a huge, great tower. You do each arm of it one at a time. It's more deliverable for that. The other thing that we did in this competition entry was to really promote the idea of taking people from Stephen Avenue, which is the sort of walkable spine of the city, and then extend it right through City Hall, then blast it out at the other end at a diagonal orientation across the grid. This enables everyone to experience each typology and each piece of the plan, but at the same time creating this umbilical cord that takes people right from the heart of Calgary by foot through every piece of the city and then to the river, which is, you know, a very spectacular asset that people weren't at the time particularly appreciating. So this was the plan that came from that, and it's again. This is the competition entry, and it hasn't massively changed since the time that we put that together. And we had visualizations that again show the step up of transition. So you've got the low buildings on the front overlooking the river. By the way, you animate that river space and really make it a special place in its own right. It's all about placemaking, the sense of quality, bringing activity and fun to an area that was otherwise bereft of that. And making the best of some of these other initiatives, including the Riverwalk, which is already in hand. But at the same time, it's giving people with the opportunity who have plots behind that riverfront to be able to overlook that and look down and relate to the river itself. While at the same time, animating that diagonal piece so that you're bringing value right into the heart of the development. You're connecting people of Calgary through City Hall back into the heart of East Village. And I think in a way, the missing middle is still one of the big challenges that we need to overcome in East Village. But many of the pieces are already falling into place. And I know there are other legacy elements that are coming up in the very near future, as Kate has been saying. So we pulled together our proposals within, as Kate says, a 2-week period, and we submitted that in December 2008. But this was a scheme that wasn't really about just creating a master plan. It was trying to create a brand for the city, and it was trying to make the city stand on its own 2 feet in a way that it hadn't before. In the past, you've always celebrated Calgary in terms of its stampede, heritage, and its relationship with oil and gas. And I know you do that, you have that, and it's a really strong part of Calgary's character and appeal. But what we're trying to do is reach out to younger generations and bring a whole new way of looking at how Calgary could exhibit itself, promote itself to other cities. And sure enough, these messages all took root. So we submitted the competition entry in December 2008, presented our approach to the board, and then by January we were given the award, and we were then asked to prepare the area regeneration plan, the area redevelopment plan. So we carried on finessing the idea. We worked with parametric modeling to give a sense of how to sculpt the individual blocks. And you can actually see that some of these shapes, including the one by Minto that's coming up in the near future, actually follows the pattern and plan and the model that we had, that we'd produced even then. So this was the variant of that competition-winning plan that became the sort of standard plan. And this is just a snippet to show that the branding work that was done by residents, the graphic group that was working with CMLC, they were trying to promote East Village in a completely different way, in a more edgy manner, promoting the idea of events and activities. You've got the whole thing with the King Eddie, and bringing out that sort of old bluesy sense of edgy character. But at the same time, we're projecting the idea, as you can see, 2020 East Village. We thought that by 2020, everything would be all done, filled up, completed. But obviously, we had no idea about things like this. You know, you got the issues that relate to the seesaw and the antisocial activities that relate to that. We had the flood of June 2013. So, but despite all of these setbacks, the plan itself and the organizations that were behind it were resilient enough to keep on going, not lose that sense of vision, not lose heart, back up the developers, and keep developing these fantastic range of different attractions and amenities, starting with the open spaces. I mean, there weren't many developers or developer organizations that were championing open space as a sort of must-have piece of a development. Most people were after just quantums and buildings for their own sake. But no, here, it's first, the most important thing is to create the context, to create something progressive and different, and then after that, to start to develop the infrastructure, and from the infrastructure, you start to develop the anchors that you now know so well, and the ones that Kate has had a hand in delivering, and Andrew Mosca's fantastic Studio Bell that we've got the privilege of being in right here now today. And all of this stuff helps build the case for Calgary being one of the most amazing cities in the world. Number 3, can you believe that? It's absolutely astounding thing to achieve. And look where Vancouver is, and look where Toronto is. You know, they're behind you. But what do we do? Do we rest on our laurels and just call it quits and see what happens after that? We need to look ahead, and we need to carry on doing the same thing, but in a better way, in a more progressive way. We need to understand what the goals of the future and where that's going. Why did you get to number 3? I can tell you why you got to number 3. It's all your fantastic infrastructure and amenities, healthcare. These were all scoring top score 100. But one of the things that you also did was make sure that you stayed affordable. If you go, you can buy a flat in East Village and you compare it to the prices in Toronto, in Vancouver, or in London. You know, the prices for the same thing here are incredible. And that was borne out by a tour that I did today with Amber, and she was saying that, you know, it's affordable enough so that she's managed to buy herself a Tesla. So that's what you get from the change. You either have the bike in London and the flat, or you have the Tesla in Calgary, and you have probably a twice as big apartment. I've chosen this slide just because you've got this other opportunity that's just on the south side, which is Victoria Park. Not to say that you can't just have a city of stadia and big anchor activities. You need to back that up with the community that should live alongside that. And some of the most successful developments that are happening today in London and around the world that we've worked on have always got communities strapped to the stadia and so on. So in the old days, it wasn't fashionable to do that. And people would say, oh, it's such a nuisance. How can you live with all these crowds of people coming down the road and making a noise and drinking beer outside your front door? But actually it does work, and it can be done. And I think that is already an integral part of the plan for Victoria Park. I know that, but I think it's just to be said that it's an important thing to do. It's not just to see a district for entertainment purposes only, but to make it a real district that people can live in. The other theme I'm going to talk a little bit about is about super connectivity. You have a fantastic opportunity here in Calgary to make good on all of these promises for BRT, LRT. I know they're going to cost a lot of money, but in the end, they're going to make your city stronger, better than any other city in Canada. They really are going to help you get there. But you can't just deliver these lines, these transit pieces. And I know there's a certain amount of skepticism. Not everybody rides the bus. Not everybody wants to get on a tram, especially in weather like this. But nonetheless, people will do that. Kids who don't drive, this is what they need to get on. They need this to go from where they are to the school and what have you, and to travel around the city. But these routes are the arteries of the city, and they're what you're going to need to harden up your urban environment to get value out of it. So every time you plan a BRT or an LRT or a metro system, you need to bear in mind the cost that that's going to be. These are not cheap elements to build. And the only way you're going to get money back from these is to build density around them. And what you can see from this diagram is if you decide to build a metro or an LRT, you've got to build your density far higher than you would if you got a BRT. So keep your BRT for the areas on the mid-ground and the edge ground, but metro and LRT are the ones that you need to bring right into the center of town and make those really work well where they land as stations. And station planning is an art in itself, and you need to see each station as a 15-minute city in its own right. Don't plan these stations as just stations sitting in space. They need to be properly crafted with amenities, with local central hubs, and all the rest of it that goes to that. And that's LRT, that's BRT, that's rail, metro, whatever it may be. Stations need to be made as the heart and center of each of these communities. And so we looked at different types. There are different types of center, different types of station. I'm just going to outline two of them here very quickly. There's the district neighborhood center, which is not the city center. It's the new node that might appear 4 or 8 miles out from the city center itself. And the example that I've got here is just a piece that we did for a landowner at Crossroads, is where we tried to establish a new center, a new hub of activity around the Green Line project. Without that Green Line, this should never happen. But if the Green Line is going to happen, and you're going to put a station there, that transforms the complete offer of that Crossroads area. You can't leave Crossroads as it is and have a station there. You need to get the value back from it and create this new node that's going to then transform that whole area, which is semi-industrial, but it's got huge scope for future growth. And you can see the relationship of this node to the city centre from the plan that you've got. And then the other type of neighborhood is the transit neighborhood. It's just somewhere, it's a simple station, lower density, but at the same time, it's crucial and important. There are far more transit neighborhood stations than there are district stations. And these make up the bulk of your transit routes. And there you need to have probably a little bit more restrained in terms of density and height, but at the same time you need to make it mixed use. You can't just make these things purely residential, just as you can't make others purely for office or entertainment purposes. You need to really mix it up and make these things places where people can live, play, enjoy themselves, train, learn, and do all the rest of it. At the same time, it's crucial to make these station areas accessible, legible, modern and related to smart developments, and you need to make these connect to other anchors across the city in a legible way. So you've got well-lit streets with very roomy pedestrian sidewalks, with shading and conditioning, so that even in the depths of winter, people can still walk from where they live, from where they go to school, from university, back to the station that they're going to ride to elsewhere in the city on. But transit networks, more than anything, they shape your city. They shape not just the center. They don't just shape how you get into the center from where you live. They also shape the shape. They also have an influence on the footprint the city has and on its edge conditions. Too often, you let people or planners or authorities will let their cities just bleed off into space with no care or thought on how that would work from an energy performance basis. But as we work towards 2050 and the carbon offset targets and all of those aspects we're going to have to deal with and take more seriously in the future, we need to make sure that our cities are contained, well marked out and facilitated, and that we also start to take care on how the edges of the cities, the rural pieces, are designed and offer an enhanced component. So it's about building high quality integrated corridors, nodes that have a fantastic quality night and day, whatever the weather. It's about green spaces with amenities and high quality social offer with space to move around and enjoy themselves and meet other people. And green campus areas that in the mid-ground and the ground that goes back towards the edge of the city start to take on a sense of nature and a more naturalistic approach. And then almost lastly, it's very important to make sure you take the public with you. So you have all of these ideas, you combine them in charrette work, you work closely with each of these neighborhoods, with each of these different groups of people, with their representatives, and make sure you've got a citywide vision that everybody can believe in. Not just the professionals, not just the specialists, not just the environmentalists who might want to get to those goals quicker than others might. I think you need to bring everybody together to make sure you hit these big national goals more convincingly. I don't think any of us are actually going to hit this net zero target. There are very few net zero developments generally. I think it's going to be a very difficult thing to do. But what we can all do is agree that we need to do better than we're already doing and fit out our cities with the best possible infrastructure that responds to the environmental crisis that we've got at the moment. And then lastly, just this last slide is just some suggestion of what we might have if we focus our minds on that central block, K block in the center of East Village, to have a smart, covered, active, busy, mixed up centre that people can enjoy as the centre and heart of the East Village. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. I absolutely can see why Lyle came to you at the Hyatt and said you got the job. It makes absolute sense to me. And on to another UK native to help us. It was a good segue talking about interconnectivity of infrastructure, and now to talk about density. So a native of the UK, Jeremy holds a bachelor degree in real estate development and is a fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. He has been involved in the real estate development business for over 30 years in North America, Europe, and the Caribbean, with the majority of that experience centered on the urban mixed-use, residential, and resort sectors within Western Canada. As a founding partner with Ignite Strategic, Jeremy provides insightful market research and trending analysis, visioning and product positioning, and strategic advisory services to developers across multiple sectors of the real estate industry. He basically tells people what to build. A trusted and long-standing partner of CMLC, Jeremy and Ignite have helped guide the land strategy and partnership development of East Village since 2009. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Kate, and delighted to be here today. Not sure why I am here, given the esteemed speakers we have, but I'm going to tell you what I know. We've been involved, as Kate said, for a long time with CMLC, I think for the best part of 12 years. I feel like the old man of the group, but I think Phil's even older. It's been a couple of years longer than me. And really for the purpose of our discussion tonight, we've been asked to talk about the new Calgary. And one of the cores of our business is to provide advice on the positioning and market opportunity for real estate projects. And we base all our recommendations really upon a very solid base of market research, which really encompasses three elements. We're not economists, but we track 8 to 12 institutional forecasters. We put all their advice in a blender and we spit out an average. And that generally works in our recommendations. We take a good look at demographic trends. There are 12, 15 trends that we follow demographically. I'm going to touch upon a couple of those tonight. And ultimately, we base everything with that on a really sort of deep understanding of the competitive landscape. So tonight, we've been asked to really provide some perspectives on what is the new Calgary and what does this mean in terms of the real estate market in the urban core specifically. So when we look at the urban core, we look at the downtown Beltline district, which made about 50,000 people. But when you look at the sphere of influence, it's really expanded out to about 150,000 people. So when I talk about the urban core tonight, we're talking about that sort of area of influence. Really, the basis of, what I will say is we're extremely bullish on Calgary today and going forward. We really think it's going to be the place to be for business and people. And we're not saying that as promoters, but we really believe it when you really look at the numbers and what is happening under the covers. So when you look at the basis of where we sit today, it's all driven through GDP and that economic engine. And when you look at where we sit, Canada over the next 2-3 years is going to have an economic growth of about 1%. Alberta, close to 2%, but Calgary will be moving forward to about a 3% growth rate, which is the highest in the province, and the province is going to lead the nation. So a great foundation from which to build. Our belief that the numbers show that over the next 5 years, including 2022, we will drive in this city a minimum of 100,000 and more like 130,000 new jobs within the city at large. And that's made up from, in 2022, we will see close to 45,000 jobs created. There's a lot of that is rebound from the end of COVID and the new job creation that we'll be talking about that kicked off really Q2 of this year. But through 2023 and 2026, based upon an expected employment growth of 2 to 2.5%, we can expect to see between 18,000 and 22,000 new jobs emerging within the Calgary marketplace. So our view within the urban core, which represents about 12% of that population, is that we will see a minimum of 2,200 new jobs and up to about 2,800 new jobs per year. And as we get into some of the real estate trends, we'll see that's actually transpiring before our eyes. So one of the changes, one of the real sort of attributes of this new Calgary is that we have a diversifying economic base. It's no longer predicated purely on energy, old energy. It's really got a diversifying base which is going to create a stability and an economic platform from which to grow. So the areas which are growing, now these are happening throughout the city. Some are more influential in the urban core, but these are the areas of growth. Energy will continue to be obviously a backbone, but moving into sort of clean tech technology. And so when we look at that in Alberta, there are today over 200 companies in Alberta now working in the clean tech industry, over 900 within all industries, and employing about 14,000 people. So we're going to see a diversification from really pure energy into energy and environment, which is a little bit odd, but that's where we're going. Digital tech is particularly influential in the urban core. We're seeing growth in health and life sciences, lots of companies arriving from other cities. Logistics and distribution, we're seeing all kinds of companies announcing their locations, particularly in the distribution hubs to the north and south of the city. Aerospace is growth industry. We've seen recent announcements of WestJet and de Havilland. Film and TV. Last year, we saw about $500 million spent in that industry and 5,000 people working in that industry, most of which were people on contracts, which was driving the new purpose-built rental market. And then agriculture, that's also moving to tech as well. There's all kinds of variants of agriculture that are moving into new thinking. As one illustration, digital tech, and just to give you an idea of what it's doing to the urban core, just picking 4 companies today that have established themselves from 2020 to 2022, Benevity, Neo Financial, Infosystems, and Emphasis. Those 4 companies alone over the last 2 years have employed 2,100 new people within the core, and their plans through 2024 to add another 2,100. So those 4 companies in one industry will add 1,000 new jobs to the urban core. And when you look at the numbers of job projection, it looks like it could be an underestimation. So we've got this great economic base, we've got employment growth. The challenge we have is who's going to fulfill these jobs. We've got unemployment, which right now is at 4.9%, which means that we're really pretty much fully employed, essentially. So what will be driving will be migration, and it's going to be a combination of interprovincial and international migration. This slide that we put together 10 days ago is now outdated to the benefit. And announced this last week through the Immigration Levels Policy, a federal group. They are now moving toward, by 2025, we'll be bringing 500,000 people into this country. 500,000 people. That is 3 times the level of any other G7 country by population base. To add a little bit more color to that, moving forward by 2026, 94% of growth, population growth, within Canada will be through international migration. So it's an absolute critical part of our future. When we look at what that means in terms of Alberta, so I'm just going to go back a little bit. When we look at the change in international migration. From 2000 to 2015, the country brought in 260,000 on average people per year. We moved up to about 300,000 by 2019. This year, we'll move up to 435,000, and then by 2026, 26, 500,000. Historically, Alberta has attracted or taken between 12 and 14% share, and Calgary about half of that. So when we look at what that means in terms of opportunity, we can project that by 2025, 30,000 people, international migrants, will be arriving in this city, which translates to about 10,000 new homes. Supporting and above that is we will see interprovincial migration continue to grow. After years of reverse migration, the last 4 quarters we've seen a positive growth back into Calgary, particularly from areas like Ontario and Vancouver. So over the last quarter, there's another 10,000 people net arrived in the province. Now, so we've got the great economic base, we've got job creation, we've got immigration, interprovincial and international that will be fulfilling those jobs. And this really leads to where I think is our secret sauce, the real advantage for Calgary. And Phil mentioned this, it's affordability. But on top of that, we still have the highest incomes in the country. The 2020 census has demonstrated that although we've had a drop from the mid-90s, we now still have the highest medium incomes, family incomes, net. And we're sitting at about 87,000, Toronto at 85,000, Vancouver just under 80, and Montreal at 65,000. We took a little look at what that meant in terms of affordability in the cities. What does that really mean when you transpose income over house prices? And there's a very, very interesting study that was recently conducted, I don't know if you can see this, by the National Bank, and this is Q3 data, which shows the median house prices within Calgary, Toronto, and Vancouver. So just under 500,000, Toronto 1.3 million, Vancouver 1.4, and the household incomes in Q3 2022 were all in the same range, with Calgary still leading, just under 90. So it shows that our income is now stabilized in that 90,000 range. Toronto at 86 and Vancouver just under 90. And when you transpose mortgage payments as a percentage of income, you'll see that Calgary, a typical Calgary household is putting 32% of their income into shelter. Vancouver's at 91% and Vancouver at 97%. So you look at that to what's going to happen. You're going to see interprovincial migration increase as people from Vancouver and Ontario start looking at places like Calgary for affordability, and international migrants who for the first time are really being driven. So 10 years ago, an international migrant would have naturally landed in either Toronto, Montreal, or Vancouver. That's just what they would have done. Through technology and through social media, those migrants are becoming more mobile than ever. And the two things they're looking for is job opportunity and affordability. And nobody offers more than Calgary. Just going to touch upon a couple of demographic trends. So we know we've got a strong economic base. Just want to talk a little bit about demography, because this will help direct what product profile might look like in monetization of projects. As I said, we do look at probably 15 different silos when we do our reports, but just four elements which I think are important to look at, and this is all in the urban core. So within the urban core, 34% of the population are between the ages of 20 and 34 years versus 23% within the city at large. So you've got a young, mobile population. You couple that with household formation, and 3/4 of the households within the urban core are 1- and 2-person households. So when you look at that in terms of product profile, developers should be looking at focusing on compact unit design, studios, junior ones, 1-bedrooms, and 1-bedroom dens. We think there's a real opportunity for 1-bedroom dens as designer pieces with the work with the work from home opportunities that everybody has today. So a real focus on that. We'd also say 2-bedroom, 2-baths are important because of the mingling of singles, looking for affordable opportunities. And we would throw 2-bedroom, 1-bath, throw that away. There's no market for that. It's an irrelevant product. So demographics are really pointing to where products should be designed. The other very interesting reality in the urban market is that it's dominated by singles. So when you look at the overall population from an adult perspective, about 50% are singles. Again, drives product profiling. And diving down a little bit deeper into that, the 3/4 of that population, and it's about 65,000 people, will be young, unattached singles. So again, that young millennial, that individual young person looking at the urban core. And surprisingly, 20% are the newly singled. So we've got 13,000 divorcees and separations. So what you're finding is that cohort, which is very impactful on design and monetization, is either settling near family or they're moving closer to the workplace. And developers need to think, what makes that cohort tick? So it would be good 2-bedroom, 2-bath for visitation, and it's amenities that will cater toward that demographic. And the last thing I wanted to point out was mobility trends. So within the urban core, 25% of all households are moving annually versus 16% citywide. And so it's giving developers a very deep pool of opportunity on an ongoing basis for new projects that are better and more modern than the past. So we're going to talk a little bit about the real estate markets. This city, prior to 2015, was a condo town. It was purely condo. There were no rentals built from 1980 to 2015. And then the tide turned with the economic downturn and the energy crash in 2015. And since that time, at that time, there were about 6,000 condos, privately held condos that were in the rental pool. And there were about 10,000 purpose-built rentals. From 2015 through 2021, the industry added 32 projects and 7,200 units. And of those, 23 are stabilized and full. They're operating at 99% efficiency, so completely full. And there are another 9 projects that have recently been launched. They're averaging absorption up to 50 units per month. And the thing that we have seen is during those days of 2015 to 2021, or actually Q1 of 22, despite the challenges in the market, those projects averaged absorption of 800 units per year, new projects that were previously unabsorbed. Since Q2 of this year, which ties in with the end of COVID, or perceived end of COVID, and the employment bubble, absorption has increased 250%. And over the past 2 quarters, we've seen almost 1,200 units absorbed, which suggests that we are moving into a market that's going to demand at least 2,000 and probably 2,500 purpose-built rental units. So there's a real opportunity for developers. The challenge or the opportunity is supply. So when we look at where we sit right now, we've got 1,300 units of product. We've got 500 that are being built in 4 projects through the end of 2023. 1,800 units. We will essentially, in my opinion, be in a position of 0 vacancy by the end of next year. If we throw that out further to the end of 2025, it's even more dire. We have the 1,300 units that are currently available. We have another 2,825 under construction for delivery by 2025. We have 500 pre-sale condos that are being sold to investors that will be delivered in that time frame. So we have a total of 4,600 units, which averages 1,500 units per year. We're going to have a need of 2,000 to 2,500. Huge undersupply. So the rental market in our opinion, is going to dominate development over the next 4 or 5 years. And what we're seeing with that is that over the past 6 months, we've seen net rents increase 11.1% on an annualized 22% increase, which is showing the demand-supply impact. To give you a little sense of how rental rates have sort of changed, prior to 2019, prior to COVID, we saw for the 6 quarters previous to that, net rents hovering around $250 per square foot. COVID hit, Q2 2020, dropped 15% immediately to $217. And then we saw a steady increase of about 12% or 6% per year over the preceding 7 quarters and hit $244. That then jumped to $271, so a profound increase. What I will tell you is that the best conceived projects in terms of product profile, relevant profile, smart amenities, not over-amenitizing, but smart market-relevant amenities, and right scale are achieving today up to $320 per square foot net. So the capacity for the Calgarian to pay more is there, which is an important thing for developers to think of when they're packaging their projects. The condo market is a completely different animal. Condo is condo world prior to 2015. 2014-15, we would have seen an average of 1,500 condo sales with a typical 30-35 projects. That fell off the cliff in 2016. From 2016 to 2021, there were an average of 350 sales per year. Prices dropped from 575 average to 475. The buyers were local investors and local end users looking for bargains. A magical thing happened toward 2020, 2021, where the out-of-town investor began to see value as an investment market. And what we've seen over the last 2 years is 90% of all condos, particularly pre-sales, have been sold to investors, many with rental guarantees. And so we saw a big kick up in sales activity. There is no end user market today. So I'm going to just tell you where we sit today. So right now we have 11 projects that are in the market. There are 3 that are complete, and those are full. There are 40 units in those projects. They're all over $1 million. Very limited market for that. 4 under construction and 4 that are in pre-sale. Those are all being driven by investors, which is essentially feeding the rental pool. Prices have increased 19% this year. 19%. And the reason for that, and I'm going to talk about the resale market in a second, but the reason for that is that the out-of-town investor has no clue what's happening really in the resale market, which is 65% cheaper per square foot than the new market. They're buying a future promise, a pure future promise on stories that are being told, which are great. I would say that I've listened into some of these presentations, and if I had hair, I wouldn't have hair today because it's quite incredible. But what I will say is that those projects are selling out within a week or days at prices up to $800 per square foot. So there's a legitimate investor market. What we need to do as an industry is we've got to tell credible stories, because if we blow it by having stories that are too overblown as the end users, these investors, which are very important to our market, if they're left holding the bag, they'll never come back. So as an industry, we want to look as the investor as a really good piece of the puzzle, but we've got to treat them well. If you look at projects that have been pre-sold to date, there are some that are projecting rental rates of $375 per square foot, which is possible, but very aggressive. We better hope we get there, because we'll lose those guys. So what we're seeing, we're now seeing the average price at $675, which is incredible. What we're seeing, though, is that the actual Calgarian end user who's educated and understands the market, they're not buying new condos. They are actually buying resale market. And what I can tell you is that the resale market from 2016 to 2021 averaged 840 sales per year at an average price of $342. Since the investors started looking at Calgary, those sales have increased 100%. And this year, we will hit 1,650 resales in the urban core, double what the average was 2016. And what's happening is that the local investor is buying, and the renter, the aspirational renter, is transitioning to the resale market because the average price, which hasn't changed essentially, the cost of owning a $340,000 condo is exactly the same as renting a 2-bedroom, 2-bath rental. So what you're seeing is the renter is transitioning to resale, and as the resale price, as the rents go up, which they will, we think 8 to 10% over the next 2 years per year, resale prices will increase also at that step. And we've seen an increase of 8% in the last quarter for the first time. So there's a direct correlation between rental and resale. Now the challenge is that right now, the average price of a resale unit is $407 per square foot. The average price of a new condo is $674. There's a 66% delta. Smart buyers are buying resale, but the out-of-town guys don't look at that. In a balanced market, when you look at what makes an end user move to new versus resale, the historic chasm is 25 to 30%. Our view would be that that delta is going to take probably 4 to 5 years to fill, right? That's going to work lockstep with rental rates. So there is a condo market, it's investor driven. The end user market will come back within 4 or 5 years. So developers now need to start thinking about multi-tenured opportunities. So very quickly in summary, what I would say is that, and again, this is our view, but it's based on what we do, is that we think there's a go-forward demand of 2,000 units per annum in the rental market, new purpose-built. I think it'll go to 2,500. Shortfall by 2025. It's not going to be fulfilled. It's going to get worse through 2025. So huge opportunity for developers. There's going to be upward pressure on rents. We think is 8 to 10% per year for the next number of years. Need to focus on compact design for affordability. It's not rental rates per square foot. It's actual hard prices. There needs to be a rationalization of building amenities from resort-style amenities when developers are throwing everything in there. The smart amenities today are really be pet-focused. Very simple, but do that. Great gyms. You need to look at work from homes amenities. So looking at Zoom rooms, communal Zoom rooms, things like that will all be the new breed of rental. And the really good developers are really focusing on programming and sort of that lifestyle enhancement. We believe that rental rates can easily move to $320 based on very well-conceived projects today, and we see a tremendous amount of upside. And then finally, in the condo market, investors are gold. It's great they're there. They shouldn't really be at 90%. You know, if we had sort of 40, 50%, that would be great. Rental guarantees are still in play today. To get absorption, you need rental guarantees. That will dissipate over time as Calgary proves itself. The development industry needs to really think about the stories they're telling. We think resale prices will escalate in lockstep with rental rates, and that we'll see that the end user, the local end user, will come back in 4 or 5 years. We believe that the new breed of people or person moving into Calgary, which is international migrants, is younger. They're going to gravitate toward new master planned communities. East Village will be one. There will be others, but they will be moving to the latest and greatest. And you see that in Vancouver and Toronto. You see where people move. And that's my commentary. Thank you.
You can see why I enjoy our conversations with Jeremy. Thank you so much. A good context, and I know Calgary Economic Development probably is wanting to talk to you about some of the numbers and the prospects. And also I heard that any of our development partners who are here today start building. And to our last but not least speaker, Sasa Radulovic is an architect and founding partner of 5468796. It took me a while to remember all those numbers, but that is the practice out of Winnipeg. Born in Yugoslavia, Sasha immigrated to Canada in 1996 and completed a Bachelor of Environmental Design and a Master of Architecture degree at the University of Manitoba Faculty of Architecture. Sasha co-founded 5468796 Architecture with Johanna Herme in 2007, working as around a single table. I saw that table, actually. It was very small. The 20 members of 546 believe that every client, user, and civic environment, regardless of budget, deserves an outcome that advances architecture, and I've seen them deliver it. As a part of the design team behind Platform Innovation Center, Sasha brings a unique perspective to the role of community building, architecture, and design. Welcome, Sasha.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for having me. I'm not going to be nearly as riveting and as Jeremy or the previous speakers. This is going to be a rather put-me-to-sleep presentation, so I apologize for it. I'll try to finish this quickly so you can get to the conversation. I want to talk about three concepts. It's going to get very nerdy, Mayor, so I hope you enjoy that. The first one is the concept of affordances, and it's the idea in which is that what environment offers to an individual property of an object that defines its possible uses. We lay in a hammock because those affordances are obvious. The affordances exponentially multiply when we deal with cities or portions of the cities like we do in the East Village. The second concept is a concept that's part of a business train of thought, if you wish, but it is about jobs to be done and defining what people actually do and what they seek in the environments that we create. So in business, that would sort of concentrate on defining, categorizing, capturing, and then organizing all your customers' needs. And it easily actually applies to built environment, which I find rather interesting. So when we think of buildings, we need to think about how you define, categorize, capture, and organize, and ultimately design buildings to respond to their users, who are ultimately our customers. And lastly, we need to design and build for multiple futures. Design, in essence, should not stand in a way of users today in 10, 20, 30, and 100 years. And that's a very difficult thinking for when it comes down to bricks and mortar and something that you're purpose building for a particular client. So it's an effort against obsolescence. A lot of things we've learned from CMLC and Kate on how they approach their projects. And to do so, we should be thinking about removing single-purpose building. We think from our cities, we want spaces that inspire us to go in and interact in and not the places that are dormant. So I like to propose that long past is the time of designing and constructing edifices, single-use buildings that are simply objects in the city, acting just like an object in a sentence, but to start thinking about buildings as subjects, just as we want to be subjects of our own lives. So East Village is a great case study, full of objects and subjects, and like any sentence, you need both. However, unlike in a sentence, there are many objects and many subjects that master plan and its guardians, the CMLC, juggle to be able to reach out to all of us. So the concept of affordances and jobs to be done is quite common, and find it quite commonly in master planning, in landscape design, in urban design, where we plan for multiple futures to happen in a single place. The C-Square is a perfect example of that, as a stepping stone towards the completion of the East Village. And I'm not talking necessarily about programming, but not limiting multiple futures to happen, including immediate ones like this pop-up. Affordances, jobs to be done, and future-proofing were all central to the Parkade of the Future and platform that we worked on for CMLC. You're standing here on top of the roof of the LRT tunnel, and the LRT tunnel was bisecting the site. Initially, we were planning to build a Parkade Innovation Center on one side of the tunnel and leave that space completely unutilized. And it was a piece of Calgary that would never be developed to its potential. So by bridging over the tunnel, as the building does, we were able to create a building that freed up development sites on either side. The building itself is built on a very minimal slope. If you park there, you'll find it out so small that it's almost, in most instances, it would be considered a construction tolerance. Travis, you can attest to that. Designed to require minimum modifications and to be converted into office use with addition of envelope, obviously, and mechanical systems, or to about 200 residential units over its 6 floors. The combination of the courtyard and narrow floor plates assures light penetration deep into residential spaces. Rounded ends will permit windows in the future, even if the projects on the ends happen. And this is sort of the open-endedness that I'm trying to talk about today. The screen that's on the parkade could remain as a guardrail for balconies, whether they're commercial or residential. But more interestingly, it was designed using raw aluminum, so it's not finished, acts as a guard today, but it also is a repository of materials for future conversion. And without getting too technical, individual pieces require no modifications or drilling for attachment, so allowing screen to be simply removed or reconfigured or returned into a circular economy, given the fact that it's recycled and recyclable. The spaces on the ground floor are, again, all about planning for future, more intense uses. The courtyard has been adopted by platform as an exterior exhibition space, the drive aisle intentionally ambiguous to slow down vehicular traffic and encourage others to own and use the space, the basketball court, a placeholder for future commercial space. The goal for each part of the design was to contribute to the urbanity of the 9th Avenue, some of which will be successful and others replaced in the future by better ideas. So similar logic was used in the design of the interior Platform Innovation Center. Using a slightly modified raw scaffolding system, it has a trifold use as a welcoming cafe, a connecting piece of infrastructure leading people to the upper level, and as 3 separate pitch stages, an integral part of a dynamic on any innovation center. And once its use is no longer needed, a portion of it, all of it, can be removed and replaced. The similar system is based on a similar structural system. The overhead grid acts as a support for all wiring and data, permitting change of use over time. So with a combination of movable partitions and tables and wheels, overhead but within reach receptacles, and portable hanging lights, the design enables complete freedom today and the near and far future. And the Platform Innovation Center was the first test of the adaptability of the parkade itself. All floors are clear columns enabling imaginable and unimaginable futures, while views of the opening to the outside are unencumbered yet small enough to be infilled with envelope as required. So we never designed for this, but in a small way it shows what unforeseen futures could look like. One of our places in East Village is ripe with affordances built prior to the community taking hold in the neighborhood, but with customary CMLC foresight. This little node at the end of the rift contains public garden plots, dog park, and a playground, designed and built with enough space to house a small garden shed. Designing before having community to bounce ideas off is both a blessing and a curse, as one does not know what community's real needs are, which led us to a design that is ripe with affordances, allowing all kinds of jobs to be done. The shed cum pavilion acts as a place together under an urban piece of infrastructure that can act as more than storage of garden tools, shifting its role in the city from an object to the subject. And so it's lovely to see today, maybe not today, but on a visit from Winnipeg, East Village continually evolving as a place of affordances for those who live here, those that pass through and those that come to visit. So finally, one of the hardest things for an architect to acknowledge is that successful architecture and urban places are more about things that we don't know than the things that we do know, and that's one of the things that we owe to CMLC and Kate today. Thank you.
Thank you all for your conversations. I'm going to just speed ask some questions, and maybe if there's some fantastic asks from the audience, we'll also get to those. But I wanted to ask Phil, since you did a snowy tour today, and apparently the Tesla, what was kind of, other than the snow, what kind of impact would you say? Obviously, there's been changes, different buildings, but what surprised you about your tour today, and what you learned about the 504 acres that you maybe surprised you a little bit?
I think, there's a whole range of things that are surprising because I've not been here for a couple of years, 3 years.
Yeah.
So, you're still making progress. The place is still resilient to the weather.
Check.
People are still walking out there, even though you've got this sort of weather. So it's still an outdoor environment to a lot of people. And yeah, just the sense of wonder. It's still very apparent. This building forming the gateway into the creative district, because we approached it from the new BMO Centre.
Yep. Nice.
And, looking down that avenue, you could really see how East Village relates very well back to that entertainment area, Stampede area. So I think, you're getting all the ducks are lining up in the right sequence and order. Obviously, there's a lot of work still to be done around that bus, what is it, the coach station?
The bus barns.
The bus barn.
Which are actually the Victoria Park Transit Centre. That's for Doug Morgan in the crowd, but yes.
So there's clearly a lot you can develop there. There's a lot of scope for that.
There is.
And I think, with your statistics, you can see it all happening in sequence. There's a lot yet to be done, but there's plenty of success in the future.
Fantastic.
Almost guaranteed.
Guaranteed. You heard it here. That's great. And Mayor, maybe your thoughts. You heard a range of different speakers today, and I know you like to nerd out, as you said. What kind of caught your eye and that you'll be thinking as you go into upcoming conversations and any sort of direction for CMLC or direction for the city?
I think it was interesting to hear about not only the built form, which is something that people are easily able to pick up on. It's something that's tangible and you can consume it, but we talked about the economics as well. There was a lot of conversation around the types of jobs that are coming here, what's driving the economy, the social aspect, the societal aspect, the socio-demographic stuff. That's the stuff I've always loved. And to know that the conversations we were having back in 2013 and 14 about what urban environments had to hold is still playing out well. Singles are increasing in terms of people who are living in the places that we're constructing for them. I would say multi-generational households that are creating a lot of opportunity for newcomers often spin off into something different over time where, one of those generations moves out to a different place to live, and that opportunity being offered in a place like this is a big deal. And just the idea of newcomers being needed to drive our economy and to drive our city forward, we need to build spaces and places where everyone feels that they belong. And I think by having diversity of talent and when we're designing those spaces, will allow for that inclusivity. And finally, accessibility. Our city is getting there, but we can learn from other places. We can learn from places like Winnipeg, where they tried to create a neighborhood that would be 10% universal access, and it ended up being 60%. So we have work we can do, but we're off to a very good start.
Fantastic. And then maybe Jeremy, as you heard, you talked about all the stats and how we really want developers to keep building. What role, after hearing from both Phil and Sasha, what role does good design? You talked about, kind of some of the rental packages and amenities that you want people to have, but does design factor into some of these products that are being delivered?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think very often in the past, projects have been driven by architects, and really, for successful projects moving forward, it should be ingredients, the demographic ingredients should be provided to architects to make sure the projects are market relevant. That's the important thing. I think that there is absolutely aesthetic is going to become more and more of a thing. That young generation has great pride of ownership. They like to stand out. And I think variety of good architecture is going to be very important. Amenitization is changing. It's going to continue to change. So I think being flexible and just monitoring trends will allow projects to be properly articulated. COVID, for example, changed the way that people live. That some of that will stick and some not. But what I would say is that compact design, we have to keep our competitive edge of affordability is vital. We can't lose that. We've got to streamline everything to keep affordability as our driving force. And I believe it's all about smart design, compact design, but using volume within units, not necessarily looking at square footage, but utilizing entire volume within projects. And just looking at how people take in terms of amenities. I think people are moving to it. Pets are a big deal. I think social gathering
You've
spaces
said that a
are
couple
important.
times. Is it all
No, it really
across
is,
all of
yeah.
them?
Dogs, cats?
Cats and dogs, fish.
We didn't have
yeah.
the dog park in our master plan, but it's actually
Yeah.
full all the time.
So I think it's just keeping an eye on trends
Okay.
and reacting.
Sasha, what have you noticed as, sorry, in terms of trends and things that you're seeing? We heard a lot about kind of data-driven and what's being asked for. What are you seeing in terms of urban design and architectural design fitting into that you're seeing play out in your practice?
Well, yeah, I'm always the optimist that where designers will be required, and I'm happy that Jeremy has arrived to that conclusion as well. I've always struggled with amenitization, as you're calling it, because we don't build cities, we build buildings to sort of be turned onto themselves. And so what I was intrigued when you talked about changes that COVID has brought into that is we're changing the ways we live. You're absolutely right. That's driving the unit design, the building design, and so on. The amenitization itself is something that I struggle with project by project basis. Feels to me what you're doing in East Village is you're figuring out how not to amenitize every project, but build
Have
city.
the village be the
Build a
amenity,
city, yeah.
or support
As
the
an,
amenity.
as an architect, we have to build what our clients want us to build, but we like to think of it as we like to think of every building being part of the city, like a brick is part of the wall, right? Without it doesn't stand. And so as such, it relates to every other building and at the same time affects it.
Fair enough. So just a quick question for all of you. What do you see as the biggest opportunity in the future decade in Calgary? And what do you see as the biggest opportunity? I'll start with you, Mayor, just to put you on the hot seat. Sorry, I'll keep talking as you can start thinking, and then now it's your turn.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Little break. And I just want to say that I'm going to adopt the language. What did you say, coach station for the bus barns?
Bus barns.
Yeah,
Coach
what did you call
station
it?
sounds much better
I call it
than
the
bus
coach station.
barns.
I think you called it coach station.
I?
So yeah, coach station is what we're
Coach
calling
station,
it.
perfect.
So much more refined.
So much better.
Yeah.
We'll talk to transportation after.
I think the biggest opportunity we have right now is to learn from the folks that have come in and started up new businesses in our city. So many of them came for the affordability of the real estate, not only residential, but the places that they were creating their businesses in. So they came from places like Richmond, BC, and Toronto, and they said, yeah, we were drawn to the fact that your square footage costs were crushing anything that we could get in our former locations. But when we got here and we realized that we could diversify our workforce, that was the thing that made us stay. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think we tell the story of our city enough by having people who look different from what we're used to seeing, talking about why they came here, why they stayed here, and why they intend to make this their home.
Great point.
I've
Follow
got
that,
two
Phil.
two items. First is development corridors. You're spending all this money on fantastic transit proposals and a network, but you need to harden up that network and make sure the density responds to the amount of money you've invested or the province has invested. So I think development corridors is a key one, and not just future development corridors, even the ones that exist back along the C train and then out along the West Line extension, as well as new BRT, new Green Line, all of these things. This is where you need to focus your density and your best amenities. At the same time, I've seen some interesting charts that look at flooding and how you manage future risk. And I would say the west of the city looks clearly to have less risk than the east of the city. So I think you need to turn your attention to another bookend on the west side and make that really happen to meet your target figures and to keep the whole thing affordable. Otherwise, if you don't build enough, the prices will go up and we'll lose your equation.
Absolutely. Great point. Same question to you.
I think what we have to do is continue to drive and attract business. We've got to expand that diversification in the business base. That's critical. And I think as a reverse of that, so business is going to come to Calgary because of the economics. But I think the real opportunity we have is reverse of that, is to create amenities and gathering places and entertainment that will actually attract the resident first. Because for the first time, business is now following residents. Everybody's fighting for staff. So I think as a city, we're young, we've got lots of opportunities. We've got to create those magical places. So that's why I think places like the entertainment districts are going to be massive magnets, and that needs to be thought of in other areas as well. So we've got a blank slate, in my opinion.
Great. Sasha, last word. No pressure.
Well, I'm still super excited with Missing Middle, with buildings up to 6 or 7 stories, and building cities using that rather than the point towers and the single-family houses, because I think that is a bridge to a really sustainable future and growing a population that understands how to grow a family in an apartment. I've never lived in a house in my life, and grown up in an apartment, and same with my partner, and I think it's quite doable, but we still don't seem to know it, how to do it in North America. I'm hoping we can chart that territory soon.
Absolutely. Great point. I don't see any hands, although I can barely see anyone either. But I just want to ask everyone to join me in thanking our panelists for an insightful conversation. Thank you very much.